Settle it down a little bit. Thanks for coming today. We've got a lot to get through, and I'd like to get going. If it's all right with everybody else, let's get this thing started. I'd like to welcome everybody as friends and neighbors first and foremost. We're here to do some business, but I'd like everybody to know that we view this as a community, and we all should respect each other throughout this meeting. Everybody's going to get a chance to talk, express their opinions, but we're going to do it like adults, and we're going to behave ourselves. So, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock today, roughly, and I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag, if we could. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. The first thing is a little bit of an item I'd like to say that our ninth board member cannot be here today. Jan Friends has lost a son in the last couple weeks, and his funeral's today. So let's keep her in our thoughts and prayers. And I just wanted to pass that information on. Other than that, everybody's here, and at the end of this meeting, everybody will have an opportunity to ask as many questions as we have time for. We've allotted almost an hour. So with that, I'd like to get going. We're going to go through a lot of things today. I'll just give a rundown. We've got a representative from PLM Lake Management Company here today to give a little brief overview of what we've covered, or the new contract, I should say, that we engage them for lake treatment services. So Bree from PLM will be up here shortly to give her rundown. And this will be the only exception to the rest of the meeting. All questions will be held till the end, with the exception we're going to allow a little bit of time for Bree to answer some limited questions from the audience after her presentation, because she's got other places she's got to be today. So roughly 9:20, 9:15, 9:20 today, when she takes the microphone, she's going to give a quick presentation of how she views the lake's health, where they plan to go from here with it, and so on. And again, I'll allow some time for questions limited to just that subject matter that she's probably more qualified to answer than anybody up here, including myself or Terry. So with that, I'd like to also mention that the large items we're going to cover today are the board's objectives for the next year, and largely the largest item on the agenda is a proposed dues increase, which we've been working very hard to kind of frame and discuss, research. We'll get into the details of that at the appropriate time, but with that, I wanted to start by turning the microphone over to Terry Sinkler, our treasurer, for a brief financial report.
Okay. I'm not good at this. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. First off, on the balance sheet, if you took one, this top left little column right here is incorrect. I don't know why. I had to formulate these myself using the reports and files sucking them into Excel, and for some reason that one came in wrong. The actual total checking and savings difference is actually $3,831.69. It's just subtracting the first two columns. The third column was incorrect. And then on the revenue and expenses one, budget versus actual, yeah, they're all correct. But I just wanted to clarify, someone may look under income and see other revenue and adjustments, adjustments and corrections, the 858 negative. What those are actually where we didn't have the correct information in our database and somebody said, no, I paid in 2021 the $102, so we have to do journal entries to reverse it out. That's all those are. And then the other one that may be questioned would be the legal under expense, contract office services, legal and tax preparation costs, the 1,169, and that's basically okay. I have that's having our taxes done, and then there was title searches to make sure properties were actually in, and then having language for last year run by a lawyer to make sure it was correct for the ballot. And that's basically it. The what?
The actual.
Okay.
All right, Terry, thank you. On an overview basis, what you're going to see on the balance sheet is we're carrying a balance right now, as of June 30th, of $116,000. We have a dam fund balance of $25,000. We'll get to that later. We have managed so far this year to keep the weed control costs down within budget, within a slightly reduced budget because of the new contract relationship with PLM. And as that's kind of the largest line item on our annual revenue and expense statement for now, I think it's worth noting that as of right now, we are not over budget on that. So year to date, we are right in line with where we should be. And if you've got any questions about the financial statements or any particular financial information questions, please feel free to ask them at the end of the meeting today. We'd be more than happy to take them up. The next item on the agenda today is the water quality presentation from PLM. And I'll tell you, before Bree comes up here, we had a lot of work to do in the last year to get here. We had 4 companies provide us proposals over the year. Terry and I spent a considerable amount of time looking into the companies that provided these proposals. We spent a considerable amount of time understanding the lake management industry as well in order to finally settle on PLM. We're pretty excited because they've shown success in treating similar lakes with similar problems without a formalized assessment plan, which is something that larger lakes with larger budgets typically do. We don't have the resources, frankly, to hire an outside consultant to do that sort of thing, so we're looking for a one-stop shop, and I think we found somebody that does a nice job. Before we made this decision, we spoke with the president, for a lot of presidents of lakes, one of which was Sage Lake, who PLM did a very big turnaround for. We also heard from people that we know out on Lake Orion, that PLM is doing a wonderful job on Lake Orion as well. And so with that kind of an introduction, I wanted to turn this over briefly to Bree from PLM, who has a presentation set up for you. And then also, we will again take some she'll take some limited questions from the audience that we would ask Stacy stay very specific to the lake quality and lake health issues. So take it away.
Good morning. Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? Perfect. Well, thank you for being here this morning. It's nice to see such a great turnout, especially for PLM's first formal introduction to you as a lake community. My name is Bree Grable. I'm an environmental scientist with PLM Lake and Land Management. I've been with PLM for 21 seasons now. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University. Go Green. Go White. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, I knew there'd be a fan somewhere in the room. So my specialty at Michigan State was studying limnology, which is the study of fresh water. So I've been fortunate enough to work with an aquatics firm to develop a lake management region throughout northern Michigan. My office is located in Everett, right off of US 10. I have about 25 staff members that work with me out of my office in Everett, managing the lakes and ponds that we work on in northern Michigan. PLM has been in business for almost 45 years now, specializing in non-native plant control, and from there have expanded into a full-service lake management firm. We have offices in the Lansing area, in the Grand Rapids area, and then Everett, and then we've just opened one in Gaylord, which Mike Pickla is working out of, and he's your actual account manager. It was his 5th year anniversary this weekend, so he missed his anniversary last year, so his wife didn't let him forget that. So when he said, Bree, I really have to take her somewhere this weekend, I said, no, please, and I'd love to formally introduce myself to Lake James. I've talked to your lake on and off over the last 10 or 15 years, so it was really encouraging last year when we were able to talk more in depth and see about what it would take to do a transition over to PLM's management. So I want to talk a little bit about our philosophy, just a quick update on what we've done this season to date and where we see things going. So first and foremost, I think it's really important that everyone's on the same page with the philosophy and the management choices that we make, which is first and foremost prioritizing the control of non-native or exotic species. So you guys have 2 milfoil species in your lake primarily that we're focusing on. Eurasian water milfoil, which is an exotic non-native plant. Most of you are probably very aware of that because it's been in the lake for quite some time. It's important to understand how that plant reproduces, how aggressively it grows, and how to properly manage it from a root system perspective to provide longer-term control instead of just trying to band-aid the problem for short-term success, but try to deal with that long-term. Because one of the things that we keep in mind when we make decisions on how to manage a water body isn't just to try to make the lake look good for this weekend or for next week or for the holiday week, but how to manage that lake long-term. Because the decisions we make on a treatment in May of 2022 are going to impact the decisions that we make in July of 24, because all of that's connected, and it's important that we keep that in mind to preserve the ability to manage those plants and to manage the ecosystem. And so some of you might be a little offended to tell me, or when I'm going to tell you that the POA isn't actually the customer that I'm serving out there, it's the lake itself. It's the lake ecology that's our focus. Working with you guys is just the pleasure we get with being able to work on the water body. So the ecology of the lake is what we're focused on. And sometimes the goals of the residents don't always meet eye to eye. We're going to have residents that are very focused on fishing, and we're going to have anglers that only want to prioritize fishing in that lake. We're going to have others that are interested in boating and recreational uses, skiing and swimming, and we're going to have others that just like to look at the lake and keep things as natural as possible. Maintaining those perspectives and goals is what we do as your lake manager, but the science background is important to remember that the lake ecology is what we're there to do, and sometimes all of those goals don't meet eye to eye, so we have to balance that. And that's what we've been trying to do this year, specifically with the choices that we've been making for the milfoil management. The other exotic plant in the lake that we're focused on is starry stonewort. So if you're all familiar with starry stonewort, it grows as a mat on the bottom of the lake. It can grow very thick. It can grow right out of the water and form a carpet like right across the top of the surface. That species has made its way through Michigan, starting in the St. Clair Shore area about 15 years ago, and it's made its way north now, and it's infesting more of our northern lakes. One of the benefits we have of being in northern Michigan is we can learn from our southern counterparts and what's worked and not worked down there, but we can also catch it much earlier on. One of the difficulties when it first makes its way into an area like the St. Clair Shores area is it wasn't identified very quickly, so a lot of those lakes have large masses that they're having to deal with. In northern Michigan, things can be caught a little bit more quickly because we know what's coming, and so therefore we can have more of a rapid response approach to be able to deal with things early on, which is good for the environment and it's good for the checkbook because things can cost a lot less. We do have products available that are more aggressive to try to keep those at bay, and so that we have an easier time controlling those. So we've been using a couple different products this year, specifically on the milfoil and on the starry stonewort, and control has been very good. The other milfoil species in your lake that I just want to touch on is called variable leaf milfoil. And if you're on the lake and if you look at the two milfoil species next to each other, the Eurasian water milfoil and the variable leaf milfoil, you'll notice that they look quite different. From a distance, you might not be able to notice it, but the variable leaf milfoil is much bushier and it's a much larger plant. And it actually grows, in my opinion, even more dense than the Eurasian water milfoil. The control tactics on it are a little bit different though. And because that species is invasive, it is permitted for control, but the ability to control it on the permit is different because it's technically not exotic. It is native to northern Michigan, but it is not native to most of our lakes here in Michigan. And so even though it isn't exotic from a different continent, it's not necessarily native to our specific lakes right in this area. And because of that, that's why you tend to see that invasive. So we do have a product on the market that's been approved for use the last 5 years in Michigan called Percellacor. It's a systemic herbicide that does attack the root system, and we did use that on the variable leaf milfoil with some very good success this year. It's important to keep in mind that even though we're attacking the root systems, the goal of the treatment is to manage those to the lowest infestation possible. Eradication, although we would love to be able to say that's possible and we can achieve that, is not a realistic term in lake management. Maintenance is in getting those levels down as low as possible. One of the things we try to do here at PLM is keep everyone very aware and involved so no one is caught off guard with the treatment program. So we do distribute our tentative schedule out in the spring, and we do try to stick to that as close as possible. However, you will have noticed last week we had a rain event that came through on Thursday that impacted our treatment, so we had to come back out this last week. So we did get off schedule a little bit towards the end of the season, but we do distribute that schedule. We list it as a tentative treatment schedule with the weeks of, and we keep to that as close as possible. We do pre-post your lake, so you'll see those signs go out the day before. Always go off the sign in your yard as far as knowing what was treated and the days that it was treated. Mike included an update on some specifics from the June, July, and August treatment, so I did just want to provide those a little bit more specifically to what was done for anyone that may want to know more specifics. But for the June treatment, the milfoil was the primary focus, primarily on Shadow Lake and one bay on the north side of Lake James, and we have found no regrowth in those areas this year from that milfoil treatment thus far. The T channel was treated for starry stonewort as well as the canal on the north with a product called flumioxazin. The treatment was very successful with minimal regrowth in the T canal addressed in July, which we used a product called C-Clear G with. The benefit of using C-Clear G is that it has two components to it. One is it does control the algae, which starry stonewort is technically an algae species, but it also helps precipitate phosphorus out of the water column, and phosphorus is the food for algae to grow. So using that product is more superior because we're getting two benefits from it. Curly leaf was also targeted throughout that June treatment as well as some nuisance natives. When we came out and pre-surveyed, and I think it's important that everyone knows that these treatments are pre-surveyed for the week before, so we spend time on the water body, reviewing the lake and determining what needs treatment and where. So one of the things you'll notice is not everyone receives the exact same treatment each time around, because your property might look different than your property. You may not need treatment, you might need treatment. Your property may need treatment with these products, your property may need treatment with a different product. So we're pre-surveying that, and we're coming prepared to switch that up throughout the lake to ensure that we're targeting specific plants with the best products available, not just putting product down along the entire shoreline if those plants aren't requiring those products. The July treatment was very small in comparison to what we were expecting it to be and to what the June treatment was. Filamentous algae was needed throughout the lake, including Shadow Lake. We treated a little bit more for starry stonewort and some nuisance natives. The August treatment did find 2 new locations of starry stonewort, so it's important to know that that plant is popping up in different areas of the lake, but we did detect that and that we treated for that. No additional starry stonewort was found in that T Canal area, which was really exciting because the treatments were successful. We did do a lily pad treatment around a lot of docks in this last treatment that we did. It's important to note that lily pads are a really good species to have in the lake, but I, living on a water body, growing up on a water body, realized the nuisance that those can cost. Eagle permits us to treat a 40 by 40 foot section. So they view lily pads as a protected species. However, they do permit management of lily pads, but we can't just treat hundreds of feet of shoreline for them. So the permit dictates that we can do a 40 by 40 foot section right around a beach area, because the state of Michigan feels that that's an appropriate amount of space for people to be able to groom their beaches and then do physical control outside of that area. So that treatment was done this last week. We will be out on the lake again in a couple weeks to do our end of year survey, where we will document all of the plants growing throughout the entire lake. And that survey is called an AVIS survey. It stands for Aquatic Vegetation Assessment Site. And that survey then will document all those species. We'll have that available for the permit. So if the state of Michigan ever wants to come back and ask us about the management program, we'll have that in place. And this will also allow us to determine trend lines and how successful your management program has been. All of that data will be provided, and the association will have that. One of the other things that PLM does is we only ever invoice or bill for the services rendered post-treatment. So if we come out and we treat 10 acres of algae, you receive an invoice for 10 acres of algae. If we come out and you need 30 acres of algae, you receive an invoice for 30 acres of algae. It's based off the product used post-treatment. So as it was mentioned earlier, we have come in under budget this far, which we're really excited about. We never have a flat cost for a management program. So if you guys come in under budget, great. If you guys come in at budget, next year we'll ensure that we're properly prepared to ensure that your budget is appropriate for the lake needs that take place, but you're only ever charged for the services rendered based on those pre-surveys and the contract and the discussion with the association. So we're all about transparency here. Our invoices are itemized out so you can see exactly what was done, the products that were used, and then those contracted prices that are associated with that. I just want to recap real quickly again. I kind of mentioned it at the start, but what our primary goals are. Exotic species control, followed by nuisance native control if it's needed with algae. By properly managing your exotics with your native plants, that's going to naturally promote a healthy and thriving fishery within the lake. And then we get down to maintaining the use for recreational values, property values, and things like that. I just want to recap quickly. There's never a fishing restriction associated with any of the weed treatments. So there's not a fishing restriction on the label. We don't post a fishing restriction. You can fish before, during, and after treatment. There are no restrictions. There are always a 1-day swimming restriction with any weed treatment that takes place. That's the state of Michigan regulation that has nothing to do with which company that you're working with. So you will have a 1-day swimming restriction that's on that sign. It's typically a yellow sign, and it has that 1 day on there. The products that we use and the products approved for use in aquatics within the state of Michigan carry 0 swimming restriction on the label themselves. The state of Michigan, however, Eagle, who permits us, along with working with the aquatic industry, there's a standard agreement that whenever we're doing a weed treatment, we're going to put a 1-day swimming restriction on that lake for 2 main reasons. One is for the safety of you as well as my technicians. Because if you see our boats when we come through, we're not obeying the 100-foot law. We're not staying back 100 feet from shore. We're not staying back 100 feet from docks or from anchored boats or from rafts. We're getting right into your beach areas. If we're competing for use of that area and you're trying to actively swim when we're trying to bring our boats right up close to shore, that is not a safe situation. By putting that 1-day swimming restriction on, that's allowing us to ask you guys to stay out of our area so we can do our job safely. I can tell you nothing is scarier when you're coming around in a boat and then all of a sudden a swimmer pops up and you didn't see them go under. It's very alarming, and because we're within your beach swimming areas, it's better just to say, nope, everyone needs to stay out. Now, if we're just doing a shoreline treatment, the offshore areas are open for swimming. We do ask, though, not to come close to our boats while we're out there, because that's not a safe situation either. The other reason that 1-day swimming restriction is on there is some of our products are work better when the ground sediments aren't dispersed. So if you go in and you stir up the bottom sediments, some of the products can deactivate by doing that because it binds to the sediment and then it's no longer active. So by trying to keep those bottom sediments settled, the treatments can be more effective. So those are the 2 reasons that swimming restriction is on there. But some people then turn around and ask, well, that doesn't make any sense because we have irrigation restrictions that might last 2 or 3 or 7 days. Why is that? It's important to understand that the irrigation restrictions are in place because we're attacking the chlorophyll of the milfoil in the lake. And the plants on land also have chlorophyll, and they could respond to those inhibitors that are trying to prevent that chlorophyll from growing that plant. And so if you're able to pull enough water out of the lake through irrigation, there's a small chance that you could impact the chlorophyll on land. But because we don't have chlorophyll, those restrictions aren't towards people, it's towards the plants themselves, and that's why they're called herbicide, which is a herbaceous species. So that's how that works. I know it gets a little confusing, but I ask that you all read the signs in your yard that tell you specifically what the restrictions are. I can also tell you that a lot of people have automated sprinkler systems that irrigate throughout the week when they're not there, and they don't know that the treatment's taking place. One, we do communicate back at the association, so as much spreading the news of when people can know when we're coming out is great. I can tell you that we work on hundreds of water bodies, and we have thousands of people that have automated systems that they never get shut off during treatment. Do you want to know how many people have lost a yard due to PLM's treatment? 0. We've never lost a yard. People don't lose their grass. The amount of water coming through that irrigation system is very small compared to the amount of water in the lake and the amount of product being used. So although we request that you turn your system off and that you don't irrigate and you follow the labeled laws, which are on that sign, in theory, the chance of having an issue is very, very, very remote. But please follow those irrigation restrictions as much as you can. If you ever have any questions regarding the treatment or the signs, please contact the association or call our number, which is right on the sign. We would much rather explain what was done in your area specifically. And if you were to call and say what was done in my spot, I can get a hold of Mike. We can very specifically tell you what was done so that you can have an updated information right for your area. I want to end before we get to questions. I do have some handouts that I'm going to leave at the front table that talk about doing your part to help protect your lake. I can come out and survey, I can come out and collect water quality, we can come out and treat. But we're all responsible for being good riparians in the health of the lake. And there's a lot that can be done on an individual basis to protect that lake. Very small things and sometimes larger things. So choosing to use phosphorus-free fertilizer is huge, because why would you want to pay for algae control just to feed the algae with the phosphorus that you're putting on your lawn to go into the lake? So phosphorus-free fertilizer is something everybody can do. understanding that regardless to whether or not you live as an owner right on the lake, if you have deeded access, if you're within the watershed, we're all within the greater watershed. So everything that you do is impacting the lake that you live on and the lakes within that area. So there's things that you can do such as buffer zones, rain gardens, working with erosion, how you choose to rake the leaves and dispose of them not in the lake, but off the lake. Those are all things that you can do to help. These are through the flyers. And so help us help you protect your lake is what I ask for. So with that, I will take any questions.
If you could just repeat the question.
Yes.
They're not gonna come up.
Yes.
I have a little bit of a concern about the way that the notices are being distributed in our yards in the past. With another company, they would do that by boat and put them in. And one day I get a camera, my camera alerts me, and I see some young woman running through my backyard. I have no idea why she's there. I call my neighbor. We're real close to calling the police because we think somebody is trying to get away and they have been assaulted or something. And it took me 2 or 3 times of them coming to figure out, put the connection together. And so I almost feel like it's trespassing.
All right, so the question is, there's a concern with how the signs are put up in the yard with the fact that we have a runner that goes along the perimeter of the lake to put the signs up, and whether or not that is trespassing. So I can't comment on how other firms post. I can tell you the posting regulation is that the sign is put between the house and the lake. It cannot be on the back side of the house. The sign has to be presented between the house and the lake. So as you approach the lake from the house or the road, the sign is present between those locations. The sign has to be present and visible from the technician on the lake as well as the house. So by having those staked on a stake in the front of the house, they're visible from both those areas. If we're putting on a tree, which we don't do in your lake, we post them on stakes, but if they were put on a tree, it has to be put on the side of the tree so both the lake can see the sign as well as anyone entering from the house. If you have them on the back side of houses, which people call the front house, but to me, the lake side is the front house. But if you put them on the back side of the house and people are in the house, they're not going to see those signs when they leave the house to go in. Road ends is not permitted. Permitting along the road on the back side of the house is not legal. The signs have to be at least 12 inches off the ground. They have to be on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or larger. So there's very specific rules that we have to follow. So when PLM does the posting with the staking, we pre-stake those, and then yes, we run the shoreline of the lake to put those up every 100 feet or each house, whichever comes first approximately. And so I can tell you my staff does the best they can to ensure that each house has a sign and that we follow those rules that are set out for them. They do the best they can in the decisions on where to put those signs. Posting and staking is a large endeavor, but we try to do the best that we can to make sure that we appease that. I'm not sure how the other companies move their posters around the lake. I can tell you that we drop a poster and they run the shoreline of the lake to put those signs up within the parameters that are set forward by the state of Michigan. I do understand that that is viewing as trespassing because we are on your private property.
Why don't they have an identifying vest or something?
They do.
So that we know, that would be a pretty simple.
They do. They're wearing.
I haven't noticed one. I see some kid, I understand. We see somebody just running through the yard, they're not identified at all.
Well, they do have.
Unless you see the sign in their hand, you don't know.
Well, they are wearing company logoed shirts that say PLM. It's a huge logo on the back of the shirt. They're bright yellow in color and there's a logo on the front. They're carrying a stack of signs that are yellow. So I can tell you now that you've seen them and that you know what to expect, you're going to be more accustomed to seeing how we do that. Regardless to whether, I can't imagine that the other company would come in to 700 houses individually to drop them off.
They did.
They
threw them.
They launched them from the boat. Well, that, so while I can tell you, we're running the shoreline of the lake, and we're putting those in to ensure that our customers notify and are notified properly. And we're doing the best we can to accommodate that. Yeah.
Well,
So.
tell me this, if they're injured while they're on our property, who's responsible?
PLM.
Can we have somebody in the back there? We got a couple other people.
Yep. In the way back.
You mentioned you would come to our homes and look at our shorelines. Do you charge us or our association for another visit?
So we're looking at your property when we're surveying the lake. If you had a question about specifically what chemicals went in your lake or what your restrictions are, that I can tell you upon looking at the map that was completed. But we will be back out on the lake short, like in a couple more weeks. And so if somebody would like to talk to the technician while we're out there, we definitely will stop and talk to you and let you know what, our evaluation of your beach. I can't promise that I can come out and do that individually for every person, but when we're on the lake, whether we're treating or surveying, my technicians are happy to stop and talk to you about your beach.
How about this gentleman back here who's had his hand up?
Yes, sir.
Are you testing for E. coli anywhere in the lake?
So you guys are participating with our water quality program. We test in the spring and the fall for a bunch of different nutrients, dissolved oxygen and such, and then we do summer E. coli testing. Our E. coli testing is a no news is good news. So when we collect our samples, if you don't hear back, that means all the samples were within the realm of what's considered safe and there's no concern. If we get the testing back and we get those results back within 24 hours, if anything's elevated, we notify you, immediately retest before taking action to close any areas down.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have those maps available that you're talking about? You map that stuff out, then you
Yes.
look it up and say, okay, here's my property, here's what they treated. I
Yes.
can look that up online.
Yep, so, well, not online. I do have a copy of our treatment maps based on the surveys that were done. And then post-treatment, we have maps that are updated with any variants from this, and then specifically what products were used where.
And how can we access that?
We posted them
Yep.
on the website and we sent them out via email.
Yep, they're posted on the website and via email, and then at the end of the season, we submit a treatment report to the state of Michigan that will include all those details as well, and we'll make that available to the association.
This gentleman right here.
There's been a lot of issues with swimmer's itch and neighboring lakes. What do we do to keep our lakes safe?
Perfect. So the question is about swimmer's itch and what can be done to help prevent that. So unfortunately, nothing can be done to prevent swimmer's itch other than trying to keep birds off your water body, which is not possible. So cancers specifically are the waterfowl that are known to be the largest culprits when it comes to swimmer's itch. However, some recent research has shown that other waterfowl, specifically most ducks, are going to carry the parasite that causes swimmer's itch. So there's a lot of research being done to try to work with being able to treat and or prevent it, but currently we're very, very limited. There is an insecticide that we've been using the last 10 years. I shouldn't say we were involved with one test case, but it's being done on a national scale to try to work with swimmer's itch. We haven't gotten too far with that yet. Copper sulfate is historically a product that's been used decades ago by the DNR for swimmer's itch. It is not permitted anymore because of the high rates that have to be used for that. I've never been a fan of doing that. So what I encourage residents to do if and when you have a swimmer's itch problem is to try to prevent your body from being susceptible to the parasite. So some people are very allergic to swimmer's itch. Others aren't as allergic, very similar to poison ivy. I have never had poison ivy. My dad can smell it and he gets it with a rash. So there's things that you can do as far as coating your skin. Wear sunscreen, especially a lotion versus the spray before going in the water, and that will help put a barrier on your skin. If you swim in deeper water versus shallow water, it's really going to help. So swimmer's itch is within the life cycle of the larvae that goes through the snail. The ducks eat the snail, and then they poop that out, and then it's part of that cycle. You can't see it, but it collects on the surface of the water, and the wind blows that into the shallows. So if you're swimming offshore or in deeper water, you're less likely to get that. The reason the kids get it so bad is they play in the shallows, and that's where that's all collecting. So stay out of areas that are less clean as far as muck as well, but if you're in deeper water, you're less susceptible. Towel dry upon getting out of the water. If you wipe your skin down really well, you're likely to pull that parasite right off your skin, so you're not going to get the bite or the reaction as well. Taking your suit off right away is helpful too. If you sit in a wet suit, you're more likely to get a rash right under there. So those things can be done to help deal with the symptoms or prevent your body from getting it. But as far as the lake goes, from general, there's not much that can be done at this point.
Back there.
Does your company participate in aeration projects?
Yes, we do. So we have numerous aeration projects in play. A lot of research and investigation goes into determining if an aeration program is appropriate for a water body and what the goals of aeration are. So typically lakes that don't have appropriate levels of dissolved oxygen want to put more air into the lake, and therefore you would look at an aeration system. There are different types of aeration that can be used. I can tell you the state of Michigan at this point is not supportive of using aeration, and the permits on getting them are very, very difficult and typically cost tens of thousands of dollars in water quality testing if you can justify the need of it based on what the goals of the program are. So we would be happy to explore that with the association, but it's all dependent on what the goals are, because if the goal is weed control, aeration is not appropriate. If the goal is algae control, aeration is not appropriate. So it's all just a matter of what the goal is and then reviewing the different elements of lake management to see what the best element is. Part of working with PLM is knowing that when we look at the problem, we're looking at every available resource, not just dumping herbicides onto it.
We've just noticed with some of the aeration that has been done on individual canals, it reduces the muck, and it brings in a lot of fish and our frogs. And we were at one time investigating doing the canals because the main body of the lake gets a lot of action, you know?
Yes.
So.
And there is aeration programs that can be used to help deal with muck control. And so that is one of the goals that aeration does come up with in discussion. I have not been part of any of those discussions with the board thus far, but that's definitely something that we will continue to keep on our radar and work with the board with.
This gentleman over there. Yep. You had your hand up.
Me? I'm not a gentleman.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to get to that.
I want to say that Starry Stonewort had been my particular nemesis for about the last 7 years, and I've done my best to educate myself on it, as probably many people have, as I slowly watched it make its way into my swim area to where it ultimately would cover the whole thing by the end of June. So I kept a good eye on the water this year, again, in my particular area. And while I don't see it gone, I see a lot less of it. And I'm very happy about that. And I think that that your company is on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Does anybody else have any questions? Sure.
You said if you come in under budget, it's a good thing, but what happens if what you want to do is cost more than what we can budget for?
That's a good question. So again, yes. So the question was, I commented that we've come in under budget, and what happens if we come in over budget, or if we make a recommendation that's over budget, and what happens in that situation. So typically how we set up a program is we have a range of costs where we estimate, like, this is what we're thinking things are going to cost based on what we treated last year. This year we were kind of shooting in the dark, knowing that a different firm may have done things a little bit differently, but we can project based on the size and the plants some pretty good estimates. If we want to use more expensive products because they're systemic and it attacks the root system, that impacts the budget. Then we kind of give a rainy day worst case scenario based on, if everything goes well, we think we're going to be here, but just be prepared based on the size of the lake and what the lake could grow. There is chance that you guys might need some different money. So we always budget here, but we always have that conversation. I recommend to all of my lakes that you have a rainy day emergency fund that's available but not part of your everyday budget, and that you just kind of hold that to the side in case we have an emergency take place. Most of my lakes, through the course of our management, are able to do that because of the management decisions we make to ensure that over a course of a 5-year period, we have that emergency fund in place. A lot of lakes are able to then lower their annual budget and utilize that and then keep that in place. If we're never able to get that there, that's a conversation we take place with the association, with perhaps the budget's not appropriate, perhaps the dues aren't keeping up with the lake needs, and that has to take place. But I do recommend that there's always a contingency in place so we have that conversation. If and when that's not available, then we have to pick and choose what is getting done on the lake, and that's when we prioritize our goals, exotics first and foremost, and then go down the list as far as our priorities go. If and when there's a specialty project that we're trying to save or plan for instance, there's a new product on the market that we want to plan to use next year, we budget accordingly, kind of on a 1 and 3 year plan to be able to hit those plans. Well, I think I hit our time almost exact.
Yes.
So
You did a very good
to
job.
keep you on plan.
I'd like to thank Bree for being here. PLM has been really great so far to work with. They've been very available to anybody on the board who's got questions. Terry Bowen in particular has kind of taken it upon himself to be a little bit of a lead on that, but they have been really helpful and available to us, so thanks again. The next item up on our agenda today has to do with an update on the dam. And just before I turn it over to Tom Rose for a brief update, I'd like just to say that the dam, you will start to realize by the end of this meeting, is probably, aside from lake quality and water quality, probably the most important priority this board has. It is not lost on anybody up here that the dam failures across Michigan, the 3 or 4 that end up being catastrophic, have wreaked havoc and cost a lot of money, downtime, and property loss value. And so, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as this board's concerned, the care and maintenance of that dam is probably second only maybe to the water quality itself. And without the dam, you don't have water to worry about. So, to me, you're going to hear a lot later more about the dam, but I'm going to let Tom Rose, who's kind of taken it upon himself to take that lead, give you a brief update on where we're at with the dam. And before I do that, one last thing, I'd like to thank again Tom Schmaltz for all of his work this year. Tom's been the go-to guy in the field helping us with the dam, eyes and ears on the ground. You need somebody like that, and we really appreciate it, Tom, so thank you for that.
I've been told I got a big mouth. Can you all hear me back there? Again, I want to thank Tom Schmaltz. Tom's sitting right over here. He's starting to hide. He and his wife have been very active in the association for a long time. They deserve a lot of credit. I asked, when we first got the board started this particular term around, they asked if somebody would take over observing or watching over the dam. That's me. So if you have any questions, get a hold of that dam man. That's me. We have concerns at one point in time when the first high water area, you know, the lake goes up and down according to the season. And if you have a really, really big rain, that can raise the lake, obviously. And sometimes the water coming into the lake is more than the dam can handle immediately. On the other side is we don't want the water to go too low, because I know a lot of you people, especially you that are more on what you might call the dam or the canals, can get low enough where your pontoons will be scraping bottom in order to get out to the lake. So there's an area we try to keep the water level at. Now, one of the things that's interesting, at least I haven't found it yet, the state hasn't determined what the official lake level is. Even Houghton Lake has a lake level that's established by the courts. Higgins Lake has a level that's established by the courts. This lake doesn't. But we do a pretty good job, and I gotta thank Tom for that especially. And by the way, it's not just only Tom. I went out on my way trying to learn as much as I could about the dam, how it was built, the whole 10 yards. And so I got to talking to quite a few guys that over the years have been responsible for watching and maintaining the dam. So I learned a lot. I got a lot more to learn. The repairs. We're very concerned about the repairs. If any of you have had an opportunity to actually look at the dam close, you'll notice that the surface is all, of course, all made out of cement. But the water continually going over that cement, just like if on your driveway, it's going to pit. It's going to take, you know, it becomes unsmooth. Not a very good word, but it describes what you got. Well, if it gets far enough, you have to do something to bring it back to where it should be. And there are different methods that can be done, as I've been told, where you can kind of smooth over the surface if you add more cement to it, or you put a cap on it of some kind. That's some of the things we're going to have to look at as a community, because our dam is not going to last forever, obviously. So my concern is, I watch it along with Tom, not only the dam itself, but the embankment coming into it. And that's what killed Sanford. Sanford's dam is very much sitting right there. You can see it from the expressway. But the embankment coming up to it, when that extra water came down because the Edenville Dam failed, just began to eat away at the embankment. Well, that just, once it gets started, you can't stop it. And that's what failed. So we're looking at the whole dam and making sure that that doesn't happen to us. Now, I think we're lucky in this case because the water being dammed up for the lake is at a lot less than it was for Sanford Lake, for an example, in Edenville. So there's not as much pressure being put on the dam. But that's not to say it couldn't happen. We'll just do our best to make sure that it doesn't. We're going to be talking later, and Dave will bring this up later. We're talking about dues increase and reasons for it. Well, one of the main reasons for it is we need to establish a serious amount of money set aside for the dam. We've already gotten a couple of guesstimates on what it would cost to totally bring that dam up to 100%. You're talking anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 and maybe more. That's a heck of a lot of money. And we're not putting that kind of money away in the fund. We have money set aside for dam. We got someplace around $25,000. But as you can see, that's a long ways away from the kind of money we're talking about. And if we're talking about doing serious dam repair, say in 2, 3, or 4 years from now, that amount of money is just going to go up because everything is going up. So one of the things we have to think about as a community, because all of us are affected, I don't care if you're on the lake or across the street from the lake or back a little bit, all of our property values are determined by what happens to our lake. I think everybody knows that. So that's our concern. That's what I consider to be my job as your dam man. So any questions, we'll bring them up later as Dave has already indicated, but that's a quick report. And if you want, I'll be glad to go with you, go down, we can look at the dam, and just give me a call. Thank you.
Thanks for that update, Tom. It is probably the largest, most important item that we have to take care of, and it'll be the common thread through the balance of today's meeting. Next thing on the agenda have to do with community items. Generally speaking, we've got a handful of things we'd like to cover before we get into the dues increase proposal, but I'm going to turn this over to Terry Bone next he's got some information on the fishing contest, and Sharon Francis have some updates on community events. So go ahead, Terry.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Bone. I don't have the booming voice that Tom has. I tend to talk kind of quietly, so I have the mic. So I managed the fishing contest this year, and for me, I look at it as an opportunity to kind of showcase the fish that we have in the lake, as well as do a little bit of a survey, right? From year over year, we can kind of see if, all right, we didn't get submissions for walleye, we didn't get, or the size of fish. I mean, lakes can go through changes, and you can have die-offs within certain species. So I like the fact that we use the contest, one, to recognize people for great catches, but two, it kind of gives us a little bit of a view of what's going on with the lake. From last year to this year, we had a lot more submissions, which was great. The size of the fish, I think, probably were up a little bit. The thing I really enjoyed was, I think the kids outfished the adults. And I really get a kick out of seeing the pitchers come in with the kids smiling and very proud of the catches. Whether it was a winner or not, they always come across super happy. I've put all of the pictures up there, or most of them, that contained a person with a fish. I get some submissions that just show the fish, but if there was a person, I put it up there so you could see some of the people that won. You don't have to be a resident, you can be a relative. So when I list the names, they may not be somebody that owns property on the lake, but they could be a relative that visited the lake. If you're here, you can collect the trophy or a medallion if you were in second or third place on your way out. If not, I'll try and get them to, if you're a property owner and it was one of your relatives, please pick up the correct species in the correct place. So we did first, second, and third places for 4 species. So one was bass, we have a lot of largemouth bass. One was pike, we have plenty of pike. We do panfish, and usually crappie would win that as a panfish because they get a little larger, although a bluegill came in. And then we also do a separate award for walleye. All right, so for adult bass, the winning fish was a 19-inch largemouth, and Dante Spagnola was able to catch that fish. Is Dante here?
No, he's not.
Okay. Thanks. You'll collect. So Dante had a triple crown. He came in first in one category, second in another category, and third in another category. So he, besides him and Dave Krug, I think I see them out on the lake the most.
Oh, boy.
Dave Krug came in second with 18 3/4. Zygmunt Kemprowski, who I know was a relative, caught a largemouth 17 1/2. The pike category, Dave Krug caught a 30-inch pike on our lake, which is really big. Dante Spagnola caught the 27-inch pike. Jimmy Rome caught a 27-inch pike as well, and we had to kind of do it by weight to figure out who was second and third. Panfish, Dominic Bernard, who is Dante Spagnola's brother-in-law, I think, outfished him in this category, caught one out of the back of the boat for first place. Joe Yukobowski caught a 12-inch, and Dante Spagnola caught a 11.5-inch crappie. The adults didn't catch any walleye this year. I think there were a couple last year. On the youth side, bass, Luke Krupski caught a 19 1/2, the biggest bass submitted this year in both categories. Easton McGee caught 18 1/2 largemouth. And then Josh Lasiski and Isaac Rome both came in with an 18-inch bass. Isaac is a relative of mine, so I'll get him a separate award. So if Isaac's here, he can collect the third place. On the pike side, Luke did awesome. Luke Kropsky, 29-inch pike. You'll see his face up there in a couple pictures. Easton McGee as well, 26 1/2, second place. John Mitchie, 24 1/2. And then on the panfish side, Isaac Rome, 11-inch crappie, and William Riemann had a 9-inch bluegill, which is a really nice sized bluegill. We did have a youth walleye, and Jacqueline Yucca had a 24-inch walleye, which is a really big sized walleye for her. And if you take a look at the pictures, the thing that I've heard a lot as people have come through is, I didn't know we have this size of fish in our lake, and I don't know if I want to swim in our lake.
Thanks, Terry. That's all fun stuff. The next community events section will be by Sharon Francis, and I'll let her take over from here.
Thank you, Dave. In our community, can everybody hear me?
Pull the mic up closer.
All right, can you hear me now? So in our community events this year, unfortunately, we had a last-minute cancellation from our picnic caterer, broke a knee and is still recovering, unfortunately. So we couldn't have a picnic, but we did decide that after this meeting from 2 to 4 this afternoon at Moosehead Park, we will have a little ice cream social for you folks to attend. So if you want to grab a ticket and you show your ticket to the ice cream truck, you can pick out your sweet treat and visit with your neighbors at Moosehead Park from 2 to 4 this afternoon. As far as our parade went this year, I think it was pretty well attended. Our first place winner was the Gruber Brigade. Mike and Patty Gruber, along with their 18 grandchildren, were out on their boat, just having a good old time, and made it a great family event for that family. The Sobczyk family, first place winners last year, came in second place this year with their decorated craft. And then the Durante family came in third place, which they were second place last year. I thank everybody who participates in the parade. We have people from downstate that come up just to watch the parade on 4th of July weekend. And as it is one of our busiest weekends, we certainly enjoy having the family involvement. So if you have any other ideas for community events, please let me know. Send in your suggestions, and we'll certainly work together and get some teams together and build those suggestions. And I think that's it for community events today. The only other piece I would like to address is next on the agenda, and that is the Moosehead Park Key Exchange. So we've exchanged 452 keys to residents who have either come to my home or mailed in or whatever. But we have a key policy now that really the residents have to stay in good standing with the association to put their craft in the water, to use the amenities. And we certainly hope, and I think I've seen the boat traffic a little bit lighter because our policy also includes not giving those keys to the marinas. So when you're getting your boat delivered or you're getting your boat removed and stored for the season, you will have to make your arrangements to get that pickup and drop off. I think it's been a little more organized. The key exchange will close September 1st. So if you haven't gotten your key by September 1st, I won't be around to give you a new key. So make sure you get in touch with me if you haven't gotten your key. Okay? That's it.
All right. The next item on our agenda is a brief discussion of some lake safety issues that are always an annual thing. Roger Benvenuti, our vice president, is going to take that, and it's important to give him some time on this and attention because of the lake safety is something that a lot of people blow off, but there's an awful lot of things going on that frankly come down to just mutual respect and having a little regard for your neighbors. So go ahead with it.
As David mentioned, safety is a very, very important issue that we have on the lake, and I've only been on the lake for 4 years, and what I've noticed in the last 4 years, and I don't go on the lake that often, but when I do, I see an awful lot of people that either don't know the rules or are ignoring the rules. There are several occasions when boats will be right on top of one another. You'll be kids tubing, and there'll be a boat or a jet ski that are 50 feet right behind the tube. I know with my family, when we see that, we get off the lake because it's just too dangerous. And I'd also like to mention that I think there's a lot of people that don't know what a no-wake zone is. I got one of my neighbors yelled at someone for going too fast in a no-wake zone, and the person on the boat yelled back, well, I'm only going 1,500 RPMs. Well, depending on your motor, 1,500 RPMs could be 20 miles an hour. So you can't go by the RPMs. A no-wake is where you're not producing waves. So the other issue that I think we've come across is that I've gotten calls, and a number of people on the board have gotten calls, that they think that the board patrols the lake. We don't do that. We can't do that. We can't issue tickets for violations. There is a gentleman, Dave Krug, and I don't know if he's here, but he's authorized to patrol the lake. And we would like to suggest that if you see an issue, to call him, and we'll post his number on the website, so that if you do see issues, that if you give him a call. For example, we were driving up one Sunday, and I got a call from someone who was on the lake, and they were demanding that I do something about it. I'm 2.5 hours away. I haven't witnessed it. There's nothing, if I were to call Dave or someone else in the sheriff's department, I can't give them an accurate description of what's going on because I'm not witnessing it. So it's up to the people, it's up to everyone here. If you see something, then you can't rely on the board to make that call for you. You're going to have to do it yourself. So just in closing, I would just like to remind people that we don't want any accidents on this lake. I mean, another example that I'll cite is that I saw someone on a jet ski leave the island, the part of the island that we have. They left the island full throttle from the shore. Now, there were 50, 75 people all around the island that day, and it's scary. So I would just want to, stress that we need to be careful out there. And if you see something, please, give Dave a call.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. He means the other Dave.
Yeah.
Dave Krug, in case it wasn't clear, is a sheriff's deputy, and he does have a sheriff's boat. He is the fellow that not only will take your phone calls, but has asked us to tell you at this meeting that he is the guy you'd rather call. He'd rather have the call from you. He would prefer to deal with it directly because of a lot of the reasons that Roger just cited. It doesn't serve anybody's purpose for the board to be an intermediary in these problems. You all have to, let law enforcement know when there's a problem, whether it's speeding on the lake, speeding on the streets. We are not a sheriff's deputy. We don't carry badges. I didn't sign up for that. Okay? We have a community here, and there's law enforcement, and they're the first people you go to with regard to that sort of thing. That isn't to say that it isn't important to us. It's very important to us. And honestly, I don't understand how we have some of these problems on the lake. With a little common sense and courtesy, we shouldn't see it, but we do. And we do care. But calling us about it is not what you should do. Frankly, it should be to call the sheriff's department, make them aware of each and every opportunity you think is a violation of the law or a clear breach of safety protocol. Let them know, because it does matter. But the question isn't, is it happening? It's what's the best thing we can do in the moment to solve the problem. And in this instance, it's law enforcement. So thank you for listening out to Roger on that. It's a very sensitive issue, and it's very important, and we do care, but we need your help.
Does he live here?
Yes, he,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yes, he does.
All right.
Yes. So the next item up is more of a broad-based discussion, and let me take a brief pause by just saying that, because I didn't say it at the beginning, we have a suggestion box up at the counter here that now or later or on your way out, if there's something that you have a suggestion or concern that you would rather not take the microphone for, but you want to let us know, drop it in the box there. We do look at them. We do care what you have to say. But I didn't bring it up at the beginning, and I want everybody to know that there's that opportunity to let us know and drop something in the box up there. So before we get going on the next section, I wanted to circle back to one thing that we intended to cover on the financial report side, and it isn't really a financial report issue as much as it is kind of a status report on an effort that Terry Sinkler is initiated as treasurer. We are working very hard to set up an opportunity for online payments of your dues going forward. A lot of people, every year that goes by, people use checks less and less, and we get the question all the time, can I pay it online, or can I take a credit card for my dues? We're very close now to having that implemented.
It's actually working now.
It's
working.
There's
Okay.
little cards there, little business cards that tell you where, if you want to pay online, where you go, and it has the fees listed. We don't cover any of the fees. It's direct to the member. Just like you do any places when you use credit cards. The most cheapest way is an e-check. That's how I did mine, and it's 59 cents.
Which is less than a stamp.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Credit card is 3.59% plus 59 cents. So if you're paying multiple lots, yeah, that gets a little pricey, but the e-check is, 59 cents. So
So it's a very
yeah, it's
economical
cheddar.
option.
We have
Yeah.
the link on there, and we're gonna send out an email blast, and then it'll also be there'll be a button on our website that you can just go there and go direct to it. It's actually called Cheddar Up. Sounds cheesy, but they were the least expensive, and Terry's familiar with, they're under their parent company, Stripe, and so that's why we chose that one. But it took a lot of research. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, and as she just said, it is available now. I know it was something we were working on this month to kind of put in place. So
Terry and I already paid on
yeah, so
just to make sure everything went smooth.
it actually is working. So let's move on from there to a brief overview of what we've been working on the last year. I'm not real big on this part of it, but you are all entitled to know that we've been working very hard to get a lot of things done. The first year we were all a new board. We spent a lot of time getting the finances, a handle on them, frankly. The second year, at the end of the first year, we put out a member survey that was very helpful in us trying to figure out what the priorities of everybody out here were. And those survey results are online on our website. So, for instance, questions that you might have: how do my neighbors feel about erosion control, or speeding on the lake, or should we be setting aside more money for the dam, which we landed on pretty firmly before the end of the day here. All those survey results informed us as a board as to where we thought where their priorities were. And so when we make this, for instance, a dues recommendation later today, well, I can tell you that it is uniformly and overwhelmingly supported. Now, surveys are one thing, but you have to vote on it, you have to have a ballot. And sometimes people who answer surveys don't always vote, and vice versa. But the point I'm making on the dues increase in the surveys of 2022 are that, judging from those surveys, there was a widespread, deep support for a dues increase. And so part of the reason we took it upon ourselves to frame it and get it done this year, for obviously the reasons of the dam preservation, but for just the broader membership at large, is that we have support. We have an awful lot of support for it. I'm going to ask later on that everybody in this room, frankly, support the dues increase we're going to ask for later. But I'll come to that later. The reason I'm bringing it up now is because it was largely informed not only in terms of general support, but in terms of the amount of the request by those surveys. So those surveys are very important. In the next couple months, I think we're going to probably send out another set of surveys that'll focus on the bylaws changes. And we can get into that later. But the bylaws changes and so on is the other thing that we've been spending a lot of time in the last few months starting to get our arms around. There's a whole slew of things that we'd like to do to improve the governance under it, the budgeting under the bylaws, and so on and so forth. And largely these decisions or these presentations for modifications in the amendments for the bylaws will be driven by these surveys. We just don't make this stuff up or say, well, you know what, we think this would be good for everybody. We're listening to what you say, and we're trying to react to making the corrections and modifications and improvements in the bylaws that you clearly want, okay? I'll just bring up another example and we'll move on. Short-term rentals and long-term rentals are a very hot button on the lake right now, with good reason, because there's a lot of strong opinions. We all have our opinions of it, but the board's position is very easy and clear, and it happens to line up exactly with the lion's share of the people who submitted surveys, namely that they are not in support of short-term rentals. Based on those surveys, it's not even a maybe, okay? It's not even close. So I would like to leave you all on that note. We'll come back to it later because there's more to talk about, but I will tell you, just to let you know, that this board, and I think the membership at large, is really completely opposed in large share to any sort of thing like that. We're going to work hard to make sure that the bylaws protect everybody here and their property values. So we'll come back to it later, but in the context of the member surveys that we sent out in 2022, we're going to do it again, and they'll be focused on bylaws changes and shift it a little bit that way. We also, as we've already talked about, we entered into the PLM management contract with a new vendor, first new vendor in 10 plus years. Obviously, it takes 3 years to really know how things are going, but we are very encouraged by not only the immediate term results, but the way these folks have worked hard to get our business. They clearly have the professional expertise to do the job, and it was a lot of work, frankly, on the part of Terry Bone. I had a little bit to do with it too, but we didn't just throw a name in a hat and say, you know, let's try these guys. We did a lot of research on companies that provide those sorts of services, and so the undertaking of getting a new contract together was significant, and we're happy to be able to report that we have a good vendor now, and we're excited to see how they perform. The next item up on the year in review section of the agenda is an analysis. Frankly, we will get into presenting the analysis and the budgeting proposal for the dues increase we're proposing later. But in terms of the outline for today, I only added it on there to make mention that was an endeavor that took several months. The amount of a dues increase and the way you budget it is not something that we did in 4 weeks' time. It took 6 months, and I will be frank with you, there are still disagreements on this very board about the way we spend the money and the way we set it aside and so on. And I don't mean disagreements in any meaningful way, but there was a lot of debate and a lot of thought given on everybody's part here, and I'm going to thank everybody for the time and everything that we all put in. This dues increase that we're going to propose today is the culmination of 6 months worth of pretty much duking it out at these monthly meetings and talking frankly about the things that we were listening to you about and why we need the money we need. So that was done in the last few months. The last thing that was incidental, relatively incidental but important, was in the effort of moving forward to the bylaws reviews and revisions of the next year that we're going to work hard on, there was some ancillary property research and analysis that we had to kind of get our arms around, because everybody up here, everybody is a new board member within the last 2 years. There's a lot of history that goes back, frankly, decades, having to do with the boundaries and the inclusion and the exclusions of who's eligible to be a member of the association. And you know, if the association itself and the prior boards had an ability to preserve like a presidential library, everything that happened in the 50 years, we wouldn't have taken this job with the burden of having to figure a lot of this stuff out. But we got our arms around it now. And now we know, for instance, the relationship clearly between certain sections of the lake who are on lots. There are, in fact, and I will say it, there are, in fact, non-lot owners that are a member legitimately of this association. There are also relationships that go back 40 years with the folks on Shadow Lake. And so the old timers here are probably thinking, well, yeah, I knew that. Okay, I mean, what are you talking about? You know. But I will tell you, I'm new on the lake. I'm 7 years here. A lot of people are not only new on the board, but they're new on the lake. And in order for us to move our bylaws next year into a condition and a draft that really solves a lot of these issues once and for all, we needed to learn these things. And so there was a lot of research and things that went into trying to determine those boundaries and frankly the historical relationship of those folks that aren't on a simple subdivision lot. So those were the things that we got done this year. I can tell you that there were a lot of little things that got done, but nobody wants to hear about all the minutia. Those, to me, were the larger things that we undertook and we've kind of focused on. Going forward, our objectives are fairly straightforward. We are going to put forth a bylaws revision in the coming months that'll have to be passed by a 60% quorum. There are several issues in there, and we're working hard on kind of creating a comprehensive and what I want to say, a draft that everybody can get behind and everybody can say in good faith is supported by the surveys and the membership at large. That's one of the bigger priorities of the coming months. To that end, again, I'll make mention we're going to do a 2023 member survey that will inform better those efforts. We also have on the agenda a follow-up dam engineering study that we will be asking Spicer Engineering to do. They did the 3-year report for the state of Michigan as required by the state of Michigan, the dam report. And one of the things, if anybody's read it, you'll find in there is that there's a section there where they're suggesting a little bit more underwater study. And it's because they could not see anything visually with respect to the intake side of the dam. They suspect, and pretty clearly suspect, that there's some degradation in the intake piping that goes there. As most of you probably know, the exterior, or the downstream side, was rebuilt several years ago, and it is, as you'd expect, in wonderful shape. But as Tom pointed out, on the lead-in side, the intake piping is, to my understanding, is almost original, or if it's not original, there's going to be metals that are corroded. The seawall area ahead of the dam is an issue, as Tom pointed out. And the Spicer report also called out the intake grading and the intake cement work. So there is a lot of work that needs to be planned for with that dam. And the first step, the first next step, if you will, is to have Spicer come out and finish what they started last year, and that is to get a bird's eye view. They get underwater cameras in there. We got to know what we're dealing with. We're never going to get pricing or proposals, or frankly even know how urgent the problem is till we do that. And so that's happening soon too. The last thing is a more general item, but the board has always had these in a general way, at least since I've been here a couple of years now. These have always been on the agenda, on our list of objectives, but now that we've got the brush fires out, I think we can turn our attention to the islands and the parks and the erosion issues that are all very important. And again, I'll keep coming back to these surveys because, honest to God, that we will make these decisions with regard to islands, parks, and erosions based on those surveys. Because everybody's got their own view of how they see those issues, okay? And this board isn't up here to be parents. We're not here to say, we know better, we're gonna do these things our own way, and we're gonna jam it down everybody's throat. We have to have a consensus with you guys, with everybody here, because it's your community and it's your lake. So please, I'll just ask it one more time, when those surveys go out and we ask for responses, please, please, please send them back. So with that, I'm going to move into the actual dues increase proposal that we'd like to present tonight. And before we do, I'd like to preface the discussion with a couple of things. Obviously, there was no ballots here for that tonight. We're not voting on that tonight. But we thought that this meeting ought to be a presentation, first and foremost, an introduction to you about the way we see the dues increase request and the justifications and reasons for it. I would suspect that after we're done explaining it, there's going to be a lot of questions, and that's why we've allotted an hour's time for anybody to come up and ask as many questions as they reasonably want to. But the dues increase process, if you will, we see this way. Today we're going to talk a lot about it. We're going to answer questions. We've also prepared some written materials that you'll see later that'll kind of recap what I'm about to discuss here on the stage. The process that we've kind of, after today's discussion, presuming that we make a compelling argument, we are going to call for a fall meeting, a special meeting. It is the same sort of process that 15 years ago the board undertook to do the last modifications in 2008 to the bylaws. And just to be clear, this dues increase requires a bylaws amendment. This is not a dues increase that we, the board, can vote for. And frankly, a simple majority of you cannot just simply, we can't do it that way either. This amounts to a mini bylaws amendment because that's what's required under our bylaws. So it will require a 60% in favor of to pass. It will require a quorum, which means at least 25% of the total of the voting members to participate. And that's how we get it done. The meeting will be, you'll see later on, we're going to call for an October 7th meeting, more formally later. Between now and then, starting today, we are going to hand out proxy forms, which you will be allowed to cast today if you want, okay? Proxy forms, as most of you know, are instruments to vote with ahead of an election. Now, when that meeting happens on the 7th of October, there will be ballots, and we will do a more, an election, if you will, or a balloting very typical to what you've seen in past annual meetings for elections and so on. But as you will recall, we also sent out the proxy voting, the voting proxies ahead of that time, usually about 6 weeks ahead, 4 to 6 weeks, with the invoices it's been in the past. And that is allowed, that allows people who are sitting here today to think about it. If they don't want to vote today, they can cast their ballot a week from now, or they can cast it 2 weeks from now. We're going to ask that we have all your proxies back by September 30th. By mail, or you can hand deliver them to one of us. It doesn't matter. So that's kind of an overview of the process and how we're going to approach this. And so if you've got any questions, please hold them a little bit to a little bit later. But let's start by getting into the proposal itself. The proposal we're asking for your approval on today is an increase in the dues from its current level to a $240 per year level beginning in 2023. In other words, this assessment year. Of that $240 per resident or per lot, 30% is earmarked and set aside and locked up, if you will, for the purposes of dam sinking fund, if you will. It is a long-term reserve to be set aside only for that purpose. We have already determined that the range of cost for the dam improvements in the next 3 to 7 years, 3 to 5 years to 7 years, in that range is between $250,000 and $300,000 in today's dollars. Okay. Let's set aside for a minute the fact that we've got, increasing costs every year. And it'll take 5 years at $70,000 roughly a year to accumulate that sort of money. And it's not kind of a maybe. We know from the Spicy report that money is going to be required. So in order to get to where we need to be, we need to start saving today. People have asked me, well, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it right now. Everybody in this room's got a roof on their house. Everybody in this floor knows that sooner or later, within 15 years or 10 years or 5, depending on the age of your home, you got a roof to fix. It's going to cost real money. The dam's no different, okay? We have to set aside money today for that roof that we're going to have to buy 5 or 10 years from now. And if we don't buy a new roof, we're going to have to fix it, okay? These are not complicated things. But it's high time that we dealt with it, because right now we've got a grand total of $25,000 set aside for a cost, in my personal view, that is, that is not something, it's over 10 times that number, okay? And it's not something that's going to go away. And most importantly, it is the key to our property values going forward. If we don't preserve that dam, every year we neglect it, we risk having a problem that will seep out into our property values, and God forbid we have a problem like Sanford Lake or some other place. It's just, to me, a bit of common sense that we start dealing with this right now. So, the general needs and purposes of the $72,000 set aside every year is obvious. Beyond that, we've got a budgeted increase for lake maintenance. We have no budget, frankly, zero budget right now for erosion control and reserves. We right now in the current budget, we have nothing for that, not a nickel. Okay, we have no money to take care of the pole barn. We've got insufficient money right now to deal with our parks and islands. So here's the point. The 70% that's left over from the 240 will go to the increasing these sorts of things that are also very important, and we will deal with them on an operating basis. For instance, in the new budget, 2024 budget, should we pass this, erosion control and reserves are going to be allocated $12,000 that year. Now, I can tell you that might not be sufficient to fix all the erosion problems, but unless we start setting money aside, we aren't going to have any money to deal with that problem at all. Because right now, we don't have any money at all, other than what it costs to treat the lake. So you can go down this list. This is a handout that is on the counter. If you don't have it, you might want to get it. It's basically there to describe where we're at and what we see the $240 increase being allocated to. And again, 30% of the money that we collect going forward, if we pass this, it's not going to go into a discretionary fund for any board in the future to reallocate. The bylaws are going to be edited and modified to protect that money. And I think it's an important element to the proposal, frankly, because without it, I wouldn't even support it myself. What it basically says is, and you can read this on the back of the, when we hand out the actual proxy, at the bottom there's an annual dues modification to the bylaws. And in short, what it says is the board shall reserve 30% of all collections going forward for the earmarked for the dam. And secondly, that no board in the future, aside from a vote of 60%, again, quorum, will be able to redirect that money anywhere. So one of the major concerns we were dealing with when we were trying to formulate this proposal was that, and I felt frankly this way myself, I am not going to vote for a dues increase until I know that the future board, whoever it might be, isn't just going to say, you know what, that's a lot of money there, we're going to build a community center. Or we're gonna put rock walls around every island and there won't be an ounce of erosion ever again. No, if you're going to stand up here, if we're going to stand up here and tell you that it's for the dam, we better make sure that not only we believe it, but that you have the ability to enforce it. And so we're asking for a dues increase, but it is hand in hand with a bylaws amendment that will restrict the use of those funds for anything but the dam. And I think that's just as important as the increase. Because anybody out there who's concerned about it being misallocated or misdirected or redirected, or they're going to change their mind, they got to go back to you to get that mind changed. So I wanted to make that a key part of the presentation. More generally speaking, some of it again to me is common sense. Mark Rumble made a couple of anecdotal observations. And here's the first one. When the Lake James Association was established in the 70s, when this development was begun, the dues established at that time were $60 per lot. The developer understood that at $60 in 1971's numbers were necessary for the long-term health of the lake. In today's dollars, our dues would be $460 a year. We're not asking for that. We're barely asking for half of that. But the point is, this association has done a poor job keeping up with the cost of living. And what we have now, as a result, is we've got a woefully underfunded situation with regard to the dam and with regard to the care of the islands and the erosion and the lake health care. It's just simple math, okay? We are not keeping up with inflation. Gallon of gas is up 1,700 points, 1,700% since those days. New car is 1,800%. Hamburgers are up 1,600%. I mean, I like what Mark was trying to do, but the point is all the same, and I won't belabor it. We are way underfunded in any kind of realistic term, and until we start to deal with that, we'll never get the lake in a secure position to protect our property values. I've already talked about the long-term reserve portions, but let me just say that there's other long-term reserves that are implicit in this that you can read into it. Like I said before, on an operating basis, we've got about $12,000 a year allocated to erosion control and parks and islands and so on. and taking care of the pole barn, which I'll come back to later. My view, and again, this is my view, I asked a question to myself when I read this. I said, well, what if we don't use that? Erosion's a good example. Those costs can be tens of thousands of dollars to deal with, but we've only got $10,000, $12,000 a year allocated. And it might be that the solution is much greater than that, or different than that. And my suggestion to this board, and any board going forward, is that to the extent that you have those numbers in the budget, to the extent that you don't spend that line item, that should be set aside into a general savings and earmark. For instance, 3 years from now, if we only have spent $6,000 to mitigate erosion, in theory, if we've got a budget item of $12,000 every year, we've got a surplus in that savings account for that purpose of $30,000. But again, it's incumbent upon these boards to properly set aside this money and not redirect it to their whims. And so that's again why the bylaws need to be amended hand in hand with this request. I'm not going to try and anticipate everybody's questions with regard to this budget. In fact, I'm going to kind of cut it short and let everybody digest this and ask the questions in the next 15, 20 minutes. Like I said, I suspect that there'll be a lot of questions. I'd rather answer the questions that's on everybody's mind instead of just babbling on about it. The next two things I'd like to get to are right now, prior to going forward, I'm going to make a formal call. I'm not a big Robert's Rules of Orders person, so I'm sorry if I'm doing it wrong, but I'm going to make a formal call and announcement for a fall 2023 special meeting for the purposes of voting on this very amendment and ballot item. We have, and for October the 7th. And I'm doing it because it's required under the bylaws for me to make the announcement, but I'd like to encourage everybody to either vote ahead of time or make that meeting and cast their ballot in favor of this increase that we're looking for. And before I go to the last item, before we open it up to the microphone, I'm going to actually ask everybody I'd like to hand out these voting proxies, because what they are essentially is a pre-ballot. They're no different, again, than the ones that we handed out last year or mailed out with our invoices. They allow you, the members, to vote ahead of time, vote now, or mail it in. We've got return envelopes that we'll hand out with them.
Can they scan and email? What are they?
No, we got to have originals.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. And Roger just made a good point. I'm going to hand them out, but we have to have them back by September 30th. We also have to have them signed, because they are not valid if they're not signed.
It has to be the original, that's what I just asked.
Yeah, and I do have to have an original, because what we're going to do is, in the interim from the deadline to the actual meeting, we are going to look, we have to verify that there are no duplicates and so on and so forth. So before we open it up, I'd like to hand those things out and take 5 minutes before we take the microphone to you all, so you can read it and consider it and then ask your questions.